My name is John Lewis. I'm the Director of Engineering here at Linemaster. Been here for about 15 years. My background is in mechanical engineering. Been heavily involved with a lot of our designs for our product line extension, as well as a lot of our custom work. For being in the footswitch space for 75 years, we've learned a ton of things. It's always an iterative process as we're going through designs, and we know what doesn't work as much as we know what does work. So whether that's lessons learned during development or returns or decisions that are made throughout the design process to reduce risk. We just have a ton of knowledge to base our decisions off of, where that's not as developed in the space is learning those things for the first time. We have a ton of case history to base our decision making off of, as well as improving on existing designs and making different options based on customer demand, and just the experience spreads throughout our whole product line. So safety through design for us here at Linemaster just means considering risk at all phases of design work. So whether that's the ergonomics of how the operator is going to interact with it and doing early mock-ups in terms of the ergonomics between pedals and comfort, but it also gets into system redundancies, material selection. So every phase of the design, we do have checks that speak about what are the potential failure modes, and we're making decisions based on the mitigation of those possible failures. So at the end of the design, it formally feeds up into a DFMEA, but we're considering those steps along the way. So in the mechanical side, on the firmware side, on the hardware side, everybody is thinking about what could possibly go wrong. And with all the years of experience, we have a wide understanding of those possible scenarios. So as those items all feed up into the DFMEA, we're compiling that information and we're assessing to see that we have lowered the risk as far as we can without compromising on the design. So our risk analysis forms usually lead with multiple follow-up actions, and we're pushing as low of an RPN as we can. So that could be, on the design side of things, we're making decisions to avoid failure, but on the inspection side of things, we're putting pieces in place to ensure that we do catch a defect if something does actually occur on the production floor, and then we're just improving our processes to make sure that they are as robust as possible to eliminate the occurrence of a defect. So all those things married to one another is a pursuit that we always have when we're considering a product for real use. Before committing to a new design, we're able to simulate a lot of the potential failure modes. So usually before we get to the phase where we're committing to a production design and to tooling, we're simulating things in a CAD environment, ranges of motion. We're doing early iterative designs on rapid prototyping, whether that's just a 3D printed housing to check ergonomics, or finite analysis in our CAD suite to make sure that we're going to meet the requirements for crush, drop, and impact. We're able to simulate a lot of those things for when we get to the stage where we're spending dollars on tools that we are very confident in where we sit on the design before progressing to that stage. There are definitely ways that you can over-engineer a switch. So one of the things that is taken into consideration on a risk analysis form is in the surgical flow, if you delay a surgery or administration of a therapy, that can also potentially cause patient harm. So when we have things that are flags for an error rather than a full system shutdown, those could be things like we're comparing the output of multiple Hall sensors to make sure that the design is working with an operating range. So you can do things as you're approaching limits, throw a flag rather than shut the system down so that you can continue with your surgery, administer therapy, and then evaluate the device at close. So yes, there's definitely things that you can do to make a nuisance to the surgeon that you want to avoid. So we are always looking for the best balance there. So many of the procedures that our devices are used in do have elevated safety concerns. So if it's firing a laser, there are certain standards that come along with those categories. Same with electrosurgical applications. There are redundancy requirements, and that could be as simple as having two switching devices in line, or additional awareness loops in the circuitry, certain isolation functions that are taking place. But we are using those as risk reductions, and the redundancy is key into being compliant to the specific use cases. Durability is definitely a key design element in a lot of our products. So we're selecting devices that either carry their own life cycle specifications. So if a micro switch has 1 million or more expected life cycles, or they're a contactless sensor, but we're actually doing real world testing on them where we're taking a finished assembly, exercising it through usually 1 million+ cycles, We're doing things like crush, we're doing repeated cleanability testing. We actually execute our testing in sort of a gauntlet fashion where we'll start with our cleaning to see if there's any negative impacts to the material properties. Then we're doing crush, then we're doing drop, then we're doing cycle testing. So the cycle testing is the last thing. So we're trying to build it up to simulate what this cumulative damage would look like throughout the product's life. And that's how we execute our testing for the majority of our products. So a lot of our switches contain an accelerometer or other tip switch device. One of the big use cases for that is when a switch is in storage. So especially on a wired device, somebody wraps a cord around it, throws it on a shelf in between uses or after it comes back from cleaning, powers on a console. You don't want that device to trigger if it's not in its extended orientation. So we deactivate the outputs when that tip switch is triggered. But it also can do things like detect if it tipped for some reason or if there's something pressing on it for a prolonged period of time. It can also detect drops and excess. So the sensor itself is picking up G's and 3 axes. So you can decide what you want to do with that information. If you wanted to say the switch needs to be checked, if you flag one of the thresholds for energy in one direction. But the majority of the time we're using it to detect tilt. So wireless foot switches have some distinct advantages over a wired foot switch. The obvious one being that there's no cord on the ground. So anybody in the OR suite that's going to be in the surgical zone isn't going to trip over that cable. Cable is also one of the items on the device that's most prone to damage. Somebody could roll over with the cart. It could get sliced. There's a lot of things that can damage that cable. A lot of times we find operators are picking up the device by the cable, which it's designed to withstand, but over an extended period of time that can cause damage. So the obvious answer there is if you go to wireless, the cable doesn't exist, but it does come with a unique risk profile of its own. When you're talking about wireless, now you're addressing concerns like cybersecurity, signal integrity, range. There's also pairing procedures that come along with that. We have a ton of experience in all of those categories, and we can give our best recommendation on what procedures to put in place to make sure that connection remains robust throughout the surgery. But there's also some hybrid approaches where we see cases where an emergency cord set is used. So in the chance that your communication is compromised for some reason, you can still back up that connection with a physical cable between the two devices, between the foot switch and the console. That also gives you some redundancy if you're run out of battery during the procedure. You can use it for connection, you can use it for power. You can also isolate those circuits. So if you found that a micro switch or something like that by chance had failed in the design, the emergency cord set could be using a totally unique set of electronics within the device. We have several designs that are set up that way. Pros and cons of both, and there's redundancy and a hybrid approach for them both as well. All of the devices that we produce here that are for medical applications get a 200% testing. So they're tested by the operator at the production bench using the same test equipment that'll be used in final. That is tested, put on a cart, batched over to our quality group. They perform a second test on the device. They're ensuring that they're getting the same results on both ends of that check. The other thing that we can do to show those results is we can data log. It could be something on a digital design where there's current consumption, voltage checks, resistance checks. We can log that data. We can make that data accessible to the end user so that they can see what the characteristics of that device are when they left the factory. Allows us to do some statistical analysis. When we're designing our switches, we're trying to consider the full life cycle of the switch. So performance in the OR is obviously very important, and it's one of the highest profile things for us, but the device sort of lives a separate life outside of the OR when it goes through whatever the decided cleaning protocol for that switch. So that could be a wipe down. They get handled in many different ways. So when we're designing the switch, we're making sure that the geometries are suitable for the wipe down procedure. So we want to make sure that we don't have any sharp corners or any internal corners where you're not going to be able to reach. We do things like make the pedal flip up and out of the way so that can be washed underneath the pedal, that there's no crevices that the scrub tech's not going to be able to get into when it comes time to clean that device at the end of surgery. There's definitely been some cases where we've had to identify risks that very hard to predict, whether that's other equipment in the operating space that's working on a similar frequency causing disruptions, or special concerns about electromagnetism and making sure that our Hall sensor is immune to those sorts of conditions. There's definitely some unique failure modes that we've gone through that I think, again, we're able to leverage the knowledge that we've had because we've seen it all really in that regard. And in the case that there's a failure mode that we haven't seen, we're also able to react very quickly because we have so much in-house knowledge. All of the development effort and the design team is all in-house in one building. We can communicate with each other very rapidly, get a fix in place, dive into root cause and get changes in place and enact them very quickly if that case does arise. In regards to an OEM asking us why they should choose us, we have a lot of the answers already. So if you come to us and you've got a specification for something, it's likely we've made a device for something very similar and we already know the pitfalls for that application. It's likely that we already have a foot switch that's been designed for that specific application or similar to, and we can leverage the knowledge that we already have in regards to that category. So being in this market for as many years as we have, we've seen foot switches that control a very wide range of surgical devices and have seen the unique failure cases that come along with those cases. Whether it's an operation where the surgeon's going to be sitting or standing or they're not going to be able to see the switch. These are all aspects of the design that we're familiar with and we can provide suggestions through. It helps speed up the development. It helps identify risk cases that may not be obvious to a tool manufacturer or somebody else that's not their niche. So I think just our range of knowledge on our product puts us ahead of others in the space.
Perfect.